Well, hello my fans and my friends. When it comes to using the computer you love, there's nothing more obnoxious than a loud and noisy fan. So what we're going to do today is swap out this noisy Color Classic stock fan for something much quieter and see if we can maintain the same great airflow and cooling capability. To access the fan, we have to remove the back case, and to do that we have to remove 4 Torx T15 screws. I purchased a new T15 recommended by Kay Koba. This is a Hazit brand 803LG-T15. A very nice tool, I must say. I've put a link in the text description below to where you can find it on Amazon.com for those of you in the US. The great part of it is the shaft is 25 centimeters long, which is 9 3/4 inches, and that means that the bottom part of this black plastic grip comes up about a centimeter above where this backmost part of the Color Classic case is, so you don't have to pull it out and do other gymnastics to use it. You can use it straight up and down like it's supposed to be used. A very, very nice tool. We also need to remove the back panel. This one is just installed with regular plus Phillips head screws. Of course, this is the one that my good friend Kay Koba handcrafted from an LC 575 back panel. Pretty amazing. If you're wondering what this is, it's just a piece of paper that I cut with an X-Acto knife that allows the air to flow out and you are able to see it a little bit easier. And here's our fan inside. It comes out very easy. There's 2 tabs, plastic tabs at the very top and the very bottom. And you want to make sure you're very careful with the tabs. Don't pull them out too much. You don't need to pull them out too much to get out the fan, but you don't want to break them off. Just push on them a little bit and then slowly pull up on the fan. Take him right out. So here's our fan, and on the flip side we have 2 Phillips screws that we need to remove. Now, if we have a closer look at this connector, we can see that the wires are actually crimped on to their respective terminals here. So you can either cut off here and solder your new fan wires at this point, or we can cut off back here and splice on our new fan wires to the existing wires, not touching these points. The replacement fan we're going to use is the Noctua NF-A8, which is an 80mm fan. This is the PWM version. And inside the box, we have a variety of goodies here, none of which that we're going to use. Now, one of these cables has a resistor in it to reduce the revolutions and therefore reduce the noise even more. But to be honest, you don't want to do that because you want this to run at its full rated speed so as to get the best cooling. And as we'll soon see, this is actually very quiet, so you don't need to really reduce the speed to make it even quieter. This is a 4-wire fan, but we're only going to use 2 of the wires. Noctua has a PWM fan specifications PDF that I've linked for you in the text description below. We have a 12-volt PWM fan, so what we're saying here in the middle applies. We only need to use the black ground and the yellow plus 12 volts. PowerCC.org is an excellent resource for upgrading Color Classics, doing the Mystic and Tacky upgrades and so on. And in their Q&A section, they talk about how to exchange the fan. And it's mentioned here that a sun-on fan has 3 times bigger airflow than the stock fan. Now, I think this is an error because I actually looked up the specifications for that particular sun-on fan, and it's showing 66 milliamps at 12 volts, but then it's showing 23.7 CFM at only 2000 RPM. I made a little spreadsheet here comparing 80mm, these are all 25mm width fans, including the stock fan, you can see here, the NMB. And then of course we have our Noctua fan, the one that I'm going to be replacing in this video. And then the ones down here are what PowerCC.org is recommending. But as we can see over here in the airflow column, clearly this cannot be 3 times more airflow than some other fan. It must have been a broken fan, if that was the case. But clearly the author of that was in error. It's definitely not 3 times more. Some interesting things to note. The current consumption column, this is really what's printed on the labels, and that can vary in practical use. I think for the stock fan, this is just like its startup current consumption because I measured it to be much less. And RPMs are by and large all the same, although they result in very different airflow, as we can see. Even though Noctua, yes, it does have the highest RPM, but not by a considerable margin, and yet we're getting 32.7 CFM according to the manufacturer. This is not something I've measured. This is from the data sheets of the respective fans. And what's really most important, the reason why we're swapping it out, is because we want lower noise. So the manufacturer of the stock fan says 22.5 dB. I'm not sure if it's A or not because it didn't say that in the data sheet, but all of the others said A. A just means that this dB noise rating is adjusted for human hearing, according to what the ear can best detect. And I'm not sure if that's A or not, but I'm going to assume because all the others were, this probably is as well, and it's roughly in the same category of dB noise. But this really is kind of surprising, this value here. Nevertheless, it really does look very good for the Noctua. As we can see, current consumption is reasonable. It has very good airflow, but yet at the lowest noise. I mean, this is quite a bit lower than even this replacement MB down at the bottom. So it looks like we're really all set to use a very good fan by swapping out with the Noctua. And here's my test setup. I have the stock fan and my Noctua replacement fan both connected to 12.00 volts, and I have my Fluke 8845A benchtop meter measuring the average current for the stock fan, and I've had it connected for a while and it's saying it's 80.14 milliamps. Now if we look at this piece of paper that I've taped to the top of each one, the paper is the same length for both. The paper is coming up off of the table for both about the same amount. Now if I put my hand here to feel the airflow, which is coming through this way, I take note of this, okay, and then I come over here, I can feel a tad bit more air. And you can kind of see that this little paper is flapping around just a tad bit more than this one is, although the distance off the table for both is roughly the same. So just a tad bit more air from this one, and it makes sense because in terms of RPM speed, this one is slightly faster than this one. I now have my ammeter connected to the Noctua fan and have been running it for a while, and it's showing that the average current is about 56.6 milliamps. So we're looking at about 23 milliamps lower current consumption for the Noctua as compared to the stock fan. That's not a huge amount, but anything is better when it's lower than the stock current consumption. That means it'll be a tad bit less taxing on the Color Classic's power supply. I'm now going to measure the sound of the fan. It's turned off right now using my Sony professional audio recorder. It's firing down at an angle so as to avoid any wind causing the mics to rumble. I'm going to turn on the power now. Now, you'll note that this fan doesn't have any rubber parts on it. So if I put something like this underneath, that high-pitched sound goes away. And now for the Noctua fan. We don't need very much length, so I'll go ahead and just cut off the cable. going to put some heat shrink tubing on these two wires, since these are not going to be used, but I'm not going to cut them off here because I don't want them accidentally flapping down and falling into the fan. Now I have my two wires attached, and I put heat shrink tubing down on these wires before I solder. Otherwise, there's not going to be any way to put it on the heat shrink tubing. And before I finalize the heat shrink, I'm going to turn on the power, make sure it works. Yes, and it's supposed to come out this direction, and it does. Okay. So the label side is where the air exits, and we want to make sure that that comes up with the back side towards this metal piece in the middle. Now this is the stock bolt, but this washer comes with the actual fan, and we should use the washers because you don't want the head of your bolt to directly touch this plastic. You want to have it touching the rubber, and we need the washer to be able to do that, which will give us better vibration resistance. Yep, works just fine. In this test setup, I have my Mac separated from my recording devices over here by 40 centimeters, and I have an iPhone, which is going to take decibel measurements, and then I have a professional recorder set up at what I believe will be ear level, which normally you're going to look a little bit down on the Mac. The reason why it's facing towards the Mac instead of recording from the back is because you're going to use the Mac this way. You're not going to use it from the back. So you want to hear how loud it sounds from a normal using distance. So in conclusion, the reduction in noise with this 80mm Noctua fan wasn't quite as dramatic as I thought it would be. Now, of course, inside this Color Classic, we still have the stock spinning platter hard disk, which increases the overall noise floor and makes it more difficult to differentiate the noise level between this replacement fan and the stock fan. But eventually I'm going to swap out the hard drive with a completely silent SD card solution, and at that time I'll be able to more clearly hear the difference. One thing that my ears can detect even now is that the stock fan had a very subtle but noticeable higher pitched whiny sound to it, which the Noctua doesn't have. The Noctua still has noise, but it's a lower pitched noise, and my ears prefer that lower pitched noise to the higher pitched whiny sound. It's still not a night and day difference that I thought it would be after reading that 17 dB noise level on the Noctua datasheet, but overall I still see an improvement and I'm satisfied with my Noctua purchase. I would like to mention though that you do not want to add a resistor to reduce the overall rotations per minute speed, because that will reduce the airflow, which in turn will increase the heat, and increased heat will have a detrimental effect on the analog power supply board that's inside the Color Classic. You don't want to shorten its life. Also, if you overclock the CPU, and yes, I'll be doing a video on that, then you will increase the heat even if you use a heatsink fan, because you need increased airflow to keep that CPU cool. So the objective here is to get the maximum amount of airflow and the minimum noise. And I really do think that this 80mm Noctua fan accomplishes that quite nicely. Next, some of you may have noticed that this back panel created by Kay Koba and shown in my last video is, well, quite a bit brighter than it was in my last video. And as a special bonus for those of you who have watched this video all the way until now, and a surprising number of people don't actually watch all my videos, I'd like to show you now a few short clips of my RetroBright procedure. And here's my de-yellowing setup. As you can see, I've got the back panel that I'm going to de-yellow here, but I removed its metal shield, and this little guy goes behind here. I removed that because I opted instead to put 6 points of Elmer's glue on the back. Elmer's will come off easy later if I want to take it off. And then I have my 2-liter water bottle here, which is what I've cut open, which makes kind of nice for de-yellowing because it's all transparent. And then I can just put it in just like this. And over here I have my oxidol, which is what Japanese hydrogen peroxide is, the 3% stuff. I've got 2 500 milliliter bottles making 1 liter, which would fill this half if I lay it on the side. And then I'm going to put in some OxyClean to boost the content of the H2O2 a bit. Today's a very cold 14-degree peak weather day, although it is very sunny, so I'm not sure if it's going to work well, but we're going to give it a try. Looks partly submerged, but I probably should put some more in. And here it is after about 4 hours in the sun. It started off at about 7 degrees Celsius. It's now just about 14 degrees Celsius. You can see there it's gotten pretty warm inside. I didn't heat it up myself. The condensation is just from the heat of the sun. And of course, this is a water bottle that's, because I just cut it nicely like this, I didn't have to tape it or anything. It retains the heat fairly well. We can see it's already quite a bit brighter than it was before. Of course, I didn't anchor it down. That's sometimes hard to do, but the water, or the bubbles, will get to it and make it pop up. But you can see I had to put it here at a place in my home where the sun can hit it most of the time. And here it is, all de-yellowed and dried. This is the panel I de-yellowed compared to the stock Color Classic panel, which I believe at one point in the past has been de-yellowed. The color of the back panel isn't 100% the same as this Color Classic plastic, but even this Color Classic plastic hasn't been perfectly de-yellowed, so the minor color difference between the two really is insignificant, as you can see here, and it certainly looks much better than it did prior to my de-yellowing it. And that brings this video to a close. Be sure to check the text description below because I've put links on Amazon USA to the Noctua Fan and other things that you can buy like the Torx T15 driver and so on. I've also put a lot of information resources that you might find useful there. Don't worry, there are many more videos coming in this colorful Color Classic series. Now before I close out, I'd like to thank 3 very special people for their PayPal donations made over the past 2 weeks. First of all, I'd like to thank Mauro Acciaccaferri for his ongoing monthly support. He is the only person who is doing that, and I think one of the reasons why is because PayPal makes it impossible to set up recurring personal payments to donate to this channel. Sure, I could convert my PayPal account to a Premier business account and then start paying credit card fees and other things, which are really quite high. But that's really geared more for businesses who exchange money for a product or something that's a subscription other than YouTube donations. And what all that means is that Mauro is really going out of his way to visit PayPal each and every month and set up a new donation to this channel. So that's why I thank him each and every month, just because he's going out of his way to do this. So thank you, Mauro. Next, I would like to thank Joe Williams, who is a fellow member of the Vintage Apple Macintosh Enthusiast Facebook group. He made a very kind PayPal donation to this channel. Thank you, Joe. And thirdly, I'd like to say a big salve to Andrea in Italy for her PayPal donation too. I exchanged emails with Andrea and she told me that she'd spent a number of days cleaning out her SE30, removing rust, and doing a complete recapping job. We're talking about the analog board, the power supply, the motherboard, and she told me that she used my videos as a guide. So congratulations on successfully restoring that SE30, Andrea. I mean, she was really thrilled, and she said she's in my age group, you know, and she told me that it really, doing that type of restoration really makes her feel like a kid with a new game. And I agree with that completely. And really, that's why I make these videos, folks, because I want to be able to give you information that potentially allows you to experience that same thrill. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. Have a great day, folks. Goodbye. Sayonara. Arrivederci.